Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Huo Yuhao had been concentrating his spiritual power ever since Nangong Wan pressed his palm against the trunk. He relied on his impressive spiritual power to forcefully memorize Nangong Wan's rapid tapping and its frequency. Even though it might not be useful in the future, memorizing the pattern was still a potential opportunity. Nangong Wan tapped continuously for 20 seconds before he lifted his hand and the screen popped back into place. Faint cracking sounds could be heard as the trunk began to split open from the center of its lid. The third elder was standing beside Nangong Wan, and he raised his hand as a hemispherical barrier enveloped everyone inside. He was also inside this hemisphere, as was Mok. Huo Yuhao and the two other contestants drew a cold breath from the moment this crack appeared on the trunk, and they understood at the same time why third elder had to barricade everyone inside. There was an indescribably somber and desolate aura emanating from within, and it seemed to stem from the bravery and majesty of an entire army in shining armor. The third elder and Nangong Wan had no reaction, while Huo Yuhao, He Kai-tu, Huangjing, and Mok turned pale as intense astonishment broke out across their faces. Huo Yuhao's sensations were the deepest, as he possessed the strongest spiritual power. It was because of how mighty his spiritual power was that he felt the greatest impact. He felt as if he were facing a metal torrent formed by an enormous army, and this torrent carried hysterical hostility and killing intent as it surged towards him. This torrent was so strong that it almost made him lose control over his spirit. A pale golden light emerged over his body, and his spirit eyes were immediately unleashed, and only then could he calm and steady himself. However, Huo Yuhao managed to use his imitation in the nick of time, so that his actual soul rings weren't revealed in front of everyone. This, He Kai-tu blurted out. He suddenly recalled the agreement he had with Huo Yuhao after uttering one word, and hurriedly closed his mouth. However, the bewilderment in his eyes was a lot more intense than before. The trunk had completely opened up at this moment to reveal its contents. Special filters made of a material was known as jade rubber filled its inner layers. The rubber itself was white, but it was extremely tough and bouncy. Jade rubber was typically used as a cushion or buffer. There was something in the center of all the blocks of jade rubber inside the trunk. This item was roughly 1.5 meters long, and had a cylindrical body. It had a conical tip, and a ringed groove at the back. The entire item had no cracks or kinks, and it seemed like everything blended together into one integrated body. The item was pale gold in color, and it shone with a metallic luster. The violent and hysterical killing intent and fearsome aura came from this item, and everyone felt as if this sensation was becoming worse over time. Huo Yuhao and the others felt their hearts tremble even though they were only looking at it. Mok swallowed some saliva as he stammered, this is. Huangjing could no longer maintain his composure, and he blurted out, Class 9. It's a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell. What did a Class 9 stationary soul cannon mean? It was evaluated as Class 9, and that meant it was a Class 9 soul tool in itself. It was also a Class 9 soul tool that could only be used once. This cannon shell could even be fired over half the entire continent at a target when used with a Class 9 soul cannon, and it could also be detonated at a shorter distance without a Class 9 soul cannon. However, there was a prerequisite, as the person detonating this cannon had to have some way to distance himself or herself from the explosion, as the user would vanish from the face of the earth otherwise. A Class 9 stationary cannon shell's destructiveness was enough to instill fear in even transcendent Doluor. The only outcome that could happen when normal title Doluor faced one of these was death. The Sun Moon Empire was the only entity capable of manufacturing Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells at the moment. Only those at the higher levels of the empire knew how many there were, but there couldn't possibly be that many. Why did the Body Sect, Shrek Academy, the Star Luo Empire, and the other powers choose to break through the Western Front when they discussed how the Sun Moon Empire was locking down the Radiant City? What did they fear so much? It wasn't because they didn't consider that dangers could arise on the Western Front. Instead, it was because they didn't dare to take the risk of traveling on the other three roads. It had been confirmed that there were at least 5 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells stationed in the other 3 regions. Even titled Doluor had no chance against a frightening entity of this level, if they were the ones who were locked on. What was even more frightening was that Class 9 cannon shells had an extremely large area of effect, and an explosion would eradicate an entire area around it, not just a single spot. If 5 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells were stationed in one direction, even powerful beings like Elder Xian would be wary. Perhaps he might have the ability to survive this ordeal, but there was no way he could protect the people around him. Every single person in the world considered Class 9 stationary cannon shells priceless and inestimable. Not in their wildest dreams did Huo Yuhao and the others expect that the Duskwater Alliance would take out such a reward so that they could win this tournament. Huo Yuhao had learned from Chenan before this that the Dusk River Alliance would give out a share of their profits from all the bets and wagers, but this cannon shell was more generous than all the shares they could give, the reason being this cannon shell couldn't be valued with money, as money couldn't even buy such an item. Huo Yuhao had heard from Xian Ziwen that the Sun Moon Empire didn't possess more than 50 Class 9 stationary cannon shells. Some were reported openly, while some were hidden away in secret, and only the Emperor himself knew the exact number. But what was certain was that a single shell could eradicate an entire small city, while 2 shells were enough to annihilate a mid-sized city. Radiant City was the greatest city on the continent, but even a city as large as Radiant City couldn't possibly take more than 10 shells. It wasn't hard to see how terrifying these cannon shells were. One of the main reasons why the Sun Moon Empire dared to go up against the Doluor continent's 3 native empires 1 versus 3 was because of their Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. This was also one of the most substantial reasons why the other 3 empires hadn't invaded them yet. The Duskwater Alliance, or perhaps the Holy Ghost Church, had too much influence and might. They actually managed to obtain a national-level strategic weapon. Huo Yuhao had unswerving will and determination, but even he felt his heart pounding vigorously in his chest. His eyes grew hot and passionate. This wasn't just a cannon shell in his eyes, this was also a sample. If he could study and scrutinize this cannon shell through and through, he could possibly enable the Tang sect to craft Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells of its own. At the very least, he could probably make it easier for teacher Xian to break through in his research. There was one problem: was the stationary cannon shell that easy to get? Was winning this championship more important than this cannon shell? I'm sure you guys have already realized, yes, this is a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell, and it's called Annihilation Storm. I will only tell you its effects, and how it's used when one of you returns with the championship. I can guarantee that we will present you with this gift on the spot, when you clinch the championship. So, you guys have to work hard. Nangong Wan waved his sleeve as he spoke, and the trunk closed up again. That violent and crazed aura was swiftly covered up. Huo Yuhao and the others could finally breathe easy. However, there was only vengeance and hatred in Mok's eyes as he glared at Huo Yuhao. His defeat to Huo Yuhao in the previous round meant he no longer had the opportunity to vie for this cannon shell, and he had even been forced to relinquish his ranked carving knife, his darkness green dragon. Huo Yuhao didn't care about his gaze at all. His heart and emotions had settled down by now, and his eyes became clear and transparent, just like before, though he Kai-tu was still a little exhilarated behind him. Work hard, youngsters. Nangong Wan spoke with a faint smile on his face. However, his eyes were fixed on Huo Yuhao from beginning to end as he uttered these words. He was momentarily stunned when he saw that Huo Yuhao's eyes had become clear and transparent once more, and nodded in his direction. Let's go. Nangong Wan swung his hand through the air. He and the third elder took point, while Huo Yuhao and the three others followed behind them, and throngs of men dressed in black flanked and escorted them. Third elder naturally couldn't let these men in black carry the Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell, and he stowed it away within his storage-type soul tool. They headed towards the western suburbs once they departed the Green Hotel. Huo Yuhao didn't have any opinions about where the tournament was to be carried out. However, his eyes were starting to close at this point, as if he were trying to concentrate and calm himself down, so that he could prepare himself mentally for the tournament. He Kai-tu fully recovered only when the cold wind outside billowed against him as he exited the hotel. A strange look appeared on his face, and he shook his head from side to side before his eyes returned to normal. Huangjing was in a similar state. As for Mok, there was only hatred in his eyes. It wasn't easy for him to calm himself down. The Green Hotel was located near the city center, and Radiant City had such a large surface area. They couldn't just walk over directly. That would be too slow. Extravagant and magnificent carriages drawn by wildebeests had been prepared outside the hotel. The three participating members Huo Yuhao, He Kai-tu, and Huangjing took one carriage, while Nangong Wan, the third elder, and Mok took another one. The remaining men in black loaded the miscellaneous rare metals on relatively simpler carriages, as they got on their respective horses. A majestic company of more than 100 people journeyed towards the western suburbs. Inside one of the carriages, Mok was full of righteous indignation as he asked, "Master, do we really have to use a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell as reward?" The third elder frowned and snapped, "Shut up. Are you even worthy to comment?" Mok was unwilling inside, but he immediately withdrew his emotions when he saw the annoyance on his teacher's face. He knew that his teacher was very short-tempered. One of his senior brothers had spoken out against his teacher for a sentence or two some time ago, and his brain was instantly blown to smithereens. Third elder turned towards Nangong Wan and asked, "What do you think, second brother?" Nangong Wan's eyes were tinged with a layer of silver-gray light. The lighting inside the entire carriage became a little brighter, as if everything was covered with silver-gray hues. That kid is very sophisticated. He managed to recover so quickly after his initial temporary surprise, and this means that he has very strong spiritual power. Our guess should be right. He should be an evil soul master who leans towards spiritual summoning abilities. However, he may not be from the Sun-Moon Empire. After all, with our sect's strength and influence and after so many years of searching and recruiting, it is impossible for us not to pull a prodigy like him to our side. The third elder revealed a slight smile on his face and said, "This kid is pretty good. At least the reward that we've offered is not wasted. I'll guide him well in the future." Nangong Wan laughed and said, "Third elder, don't try to pull that trick on me. I noticed this kid first. Spiritual calling is my thing. You already have so many disciples, but I don't even have one who'll inherit everything that I have. I've already discussed this with the vice-founder. The tournament is an additional test for him. I want to accept him as my inheriting disciple. Otherwise, why would I have asked the vice-founder to find this Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell? I've already spent a lot of money. There's no way you can snatch him from me." The third elder snorted and said, "Don't forget, he's an outstanding soul engineer. He shouldn't be older than 24 or 25 years old, but is already as good as a Class 6 Soul Engineer. If we continue to nurture him, he'll definitely become a Class 9 Soul Engineer. The founder also mentioned before that the future will belong to Soul Engineers. While his Soul Master cultivation is pretty decent, he can't give up on Soul Tools. Why don't we both accept him as a disciple? He knew he couldn't win against his second brother, and thus he offered an alternative. Nangong Wan pondered for a moment before saying, "It's a plausible idea. However, he can only be my inheriting disciple. It's fine if you want to teach him some stuff, but we'll have to see whether his spiritual power is sufficient. Soul Engineers will be the trend in the future, but Soul Masters are stronger for now. I've discovered that many academies have realized how important it is to combine both Soul Masters and Soul Tools." The third elder snapped, "Second brother, you are really calculating. You're asking me to teach him, but is going to be your inheriting disciple." Nangong Wan laughed and said, all right. You must understand how I feel, too. When I accept him as my disciple, I'll get him to return the darkness green dragon." After hearing Nangong Wan's words, Mok looked very delighted and hurriedly said, "Thank you, senior uncle." Nangong Wan furrowed his brow when he looked at him and said, "Even if the darkness green dragon returns, you don't have the authority to possess it right now. You are too impatient, you'll need to train for a few years first. When we return, you should learn how to develop Soul Tools." Moku was stunned for a moment, then turned dismal. He looked at the third elder and softly said, "Teacher." The third elder snorted, "Your second senior uncle is giving you a chance this time. If you left it up to me, I'd confiscate the darkness green dragon from you forever." HMPH. After hearing the third elder's words, Mok didn't dare to say anything. They quickly left the Radiant City on their carriages. The Duskwater Alliance was the strongest of the three underground organizations, and thus they weren't too bothered with causing trouble as they rushed to their destination, charging along all the way there. The ordinary citizens avoided them when they saw the symbol on their carriages. Huo Yuhao's eyes were shut all the while. He didn't move at all. Hikaitu also didn't make a sound as he sat beside Huo Yuhao. Huangjing didn't try to start a conversation with them when he saw how they were composing themselves. Compared to the other carriage, they were much quieter. The carriage they were in also greatly reduced incoming external sound, and thus it was completely silent in their carriage. However, was Huo Yuhao really calm despite the silence? It was the exact opposite. Right now, he was trying to gather his spiritual power. In Huo Yuhao's spiritual sea, he had entered a miraculous state. Waves were surging furiously in his vast spiritual sea. The seawater had turned golden silver after he completed the second awakening of his body-soul. Every time the seawater rose, the waves that it conjured stopped slightly. A two-colored whirlpool would also appear occasionally. As the seawater rose, a white ball of light emitting a dim glow condensed in mid-air. This ball wasn't completely circular, but oval, like an egg. It was filled with the aura of life. There were a few figures drifting atop the water's surface in his spiritual sea. The Ice Empress still held the image of the Ice Jade Emperor Scorpion. However, her body was 100 feet long in this spiritual sea. Her dazzling diamond ice crystals and azure green tail were very splendid and eye-catching. The 8 to 9-year-old Snow Empress was standing beside the Ice Empress. She was already very pretty at this age. Her long, white dress was completely spotless, and she wore a captivating smile on her face. Occasionally, she would get closer to the Ice Empress and whisper a few words. Huo Yuhao nodded and said, "Don't worry, Brother Skydream. I know my limits. Also, I'm very eager to see how much we'll gain from tonight's show, and who'll be the main lead." As he finished speaking, he revealed a wide grin on his face. As he looked at the Skydream Iceworm, he sent him a message telepathically. As his back was facing the Ice Empress, she didn't discover anything. Huo Yuhao wasn't the guy that had to be protected by the Ice Empress and Sky Dream Iceworm anymore. He had grown up. He was no longer inferior to these 100,000-year and million-year soul beasts at the spiritual level. The Sky Dream Iceworm revealed a slightly weird look as he nodded at Huo Yuhao. After that, he grinned, revealing the smile of an iceworm. The luxurious carriages of the Duskwater Alliance finally stopped. At this point, they were in a western suburb 5 miles outside Radiant City. Huo Yuhao seemed to have woken up at the perfect time. When he opened his eyes, he seemed slightly lost. However, no one noticed that a distorted light pattern had surfaced between his eyebrows, as it disappeared right after it surfaced. "We've arrived," a voice declared from outside. Huang Jing disembarked from the carriage first, followed by Hikaitu. Hikaitu moved Huo Yuhao's wheelchair down first before setting him down in it. Huo Yuhao seemed to be in a daze. However, he returned to normal as the night breeze blew past him. He squinted and activated his spiritual detection. Huo Yuhao was slightly stunned. Tonight's event is really large-scale. He felt thousands of people around him. They were clearly separated into 3 regions in 3 different directions. The greatest difference between the 3 regions was the dress code of the people inside them, as they were all decked out in different colors. The Duskwater Alliance's camp was in front. To the front left were people in white warrior robes. To the front right, the people were clad in yellow. Chenin jumped off the carriage at this point and quickly introduced them. Tonight, all the senior members of the 3 underground organizations are here. All 3 parties regard this tournament highly, and they have all sent their strongest lineups to grace tonight's event. Those in white hail from the Alto Chamber of Commerce, while those in yellow are from the Common Alliance. Apart from these 3 parties, some notable families in Radiant City were also invited, as well as some rich clients who have wagered heavily on tonight's tournament. The only restriction that the 3 parties have is that there shouldn't be more than 1,000 guests from each side. The rest here are the spectators. Anyway, everything will be carried out fairly, so please do not worry. Huo Yuhao's lips moved slightly. For some reason, he felt that today's tournament was going to be fairer than the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. At least the referee wasn't inclined towards any side. Perhaps profits were sometimes better than things that appeared to be very honorable, but were actually secretly deplorable. The 3 of them were led into the tournament venue by Chenin, under the protection of a bunch of men clad in black from the Duskwater Alliance. The western suburb area wasn't considered too shabby. The perimeter was surrounded by people from the 3 underground organizations, covering the entire venue. There were even people sent to seal the roads to prevent ordinary citizens from getting too close. Spectator stands had already been set up within this perimeter. There were 3 different spectator stands, each filled with bettors that had their money on tonight's tournament. There were other, even smaller circular spectator stands, which were closer to the core region. They were occupied by the members of the notable families who were here today, as well as reputable soul masters and soul engineers. The tournament ground was the most shocking. The circular stage in this tournament ground was just like a replica of the stage in the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. It was also 100 meters in diameter, and there seemed to be protective barriers around it. The most hilarious thing was that there were also 3 resting areas around the stage, located in 3 different directions. If they were connected by straight lines, they would form a triangle. Huo Yuhao was brought to the resting area of the Duskwater Alliance. Nangong Wan and the 3rd elder also came in. Huo Yuhao thought to himself, don't tell me there's only the 2 of them from the Duskwater Alliance. From how highly the Duskwater Alliance regards this tournament, there should be more senior members present. At this moment, the place had become quite rowdy. Before the tournament began, there wasn't a host to liven up the atmosphere. Those who were seated in the spectator seats and the VIP seats were all conversing with one another. The lighting in the venue was very good, soul lamps illuminating the entire place. As he saw all this, Huo Yuhao couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Soul tools should be used in the lives of ordinary people. No one does it better than the Sun-Moon Empire. In this aspect, the other three empires on the continent are indeed lacking. This is a gap that cannot be closed by the strength of one individual, and it'll take time, too. Even if they've realized this now, they can only choose to play catch-up in terms of their military strength. The third elder whispered to Nangong Wan, "I heard they've hired Class 9 Soul Engineers to hold the fort this time. On the 7-man committee, 3 belong to them, while we only have 2 from our side. The other 2 are neutrals. Will there be a problem?" Nangong Wan laughed coldly and said, "No. The vice-founder will bring elder brother, third brother, fifth brother, and sixth brother over later. Do you think we'll be scared of them? If not for the fact that we're giving face to the imperial family of the Sun-Moon Empire, do you think the lowly Alto Chamber of Commerce and Common Alliance could challenge us? The profit distribution in this tournament is very important. The founder instructed us to strictly follow protocol. However, we should be able to gain flexibility in some areas with the vice-founder around. I'd really like to see if the people they've pulled over will dare to oppose us." The third elder also revealed a cold smile on his face, and nodded his acknowledgement gently. Although Huo Yuhao looked very calm, he was observing everything around him seriously. After he heard from Nangong Wan that there would be more senior members from the Holy Ghost Church coming later, he was secretly surprised by the strength and foundation of the Holy Ghost Church. However, he was also delighted, as there was bound to be a dispersion of the Holy Ghost Church's strength. When things happened, they were going to be in huge trouble. Right now, everyone from all 3 parties had already arrived. Someone came over to ask Nangong Wan something. After receiving his verification, all the lights were focused on the stage where an additional person had now appeared. This person was tall, broad, and extremely handsome. He wore a bright red, elegant formal suit. His golden hair was neatly combed, and his eyes seemed to sparkle. "Greetings everyone, I'm your MC for tonight's grand final. My name is Lu Qi." The voice of this MC was rather pleasant, loud and husky. Along with his charming looks, he seemed quite likable. However, Huo Yuhao had already scanned him using his spiritual detection. Lu Qi was only an ordinary person. He had no soul power undulations. Tonight is the grand final of the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament. The 9 competitors come from the Common Alliance, the Alto Chamber of Commerce, and the Duskwater Alliance. I believe all of you are familiar with the 9 of them. I shall not elaborate further. Let us now invite the 3 chairmen from the Common Alliance, the Alto Chamber of Commerce, and the Duskwater Alliance in the organizing committee to give their own speeches. In the resting area of the Duskwater Alliance, Nangong Wan looked very grim as he muttered to himself, "Reckless." As he muttered to himself, he stood up and walked towards the stage. The third elder laughed coldly. This lowly thing from the Common Alliance is trying to court death with his stupid tricks. Does he really think the Common Alliance can protect him? Huo Yuhao and the rest only just realized that Nangong Wan was furious, because the MC had mentioned the Duskwater Alliance last. The Common Alliance controlled the sex industry of Radiant City. It was very normal to have such a host. However, this host's performance was rather normal. The self-entitled thinking of evil soul masters couldn't be understood through a normal person's eyes. Nangong Wan didn't reveal his cultivation. He slowly took the steps to ascend the stage. On the other two sides, there were also people ascending the stage. On the side of the Alto Chamber of Commerce, there was a middle-aged man roughly 40 years old. He was wearing a purple overcoat, and appeared very decent, with the aura of a powerful person. Just from his looks, it was very difficult to imagine him controlling an organization that was involved in piracy and murder. He seemed more like an official. He took long strides, and his eyes were very sharp. From the soul power undulations that he exuded, Huo Yuhao could tell that he possessed at least 8 rings. He had intentionally repressed his aura, but he should still be some ways off from a titled Doluo. Compared to him, the representative from the Common Alliance was more eye-catching. She was a lady in a long, red dress. From afar, she appeared very beautiful. Her long maroon hair was rolled up into a bun above her head. As she walked, her body swayed in an elegant manner. She had a very holy look on her face, and seemed like a mortal masterpiece. Her slender waist and devilish figure made her extremely captivating. When she ascended the stage, many men started to salivate, their attention completely drawn to her. As he participated in the tournament, Huo Yuhao had developed a great understanding of the 3 underground organizations. The middle-aged man in the purple overcoat was the chairman of the Alto Chamber of Commerce, and Litong. Opposite him, the woman was the Common Alliance master, Shangguan Weia, who controlled the sex, food, and beverage industries in Radiant City. This video will end here.